Hi everyone, this is Jung at Assault, and we are going to be making a video on how to fix a logo. This is going to be a technical fix. I'm not dealing with the concept. I'm just going to modify some things that I feel like could make this stronger. This was given to me by a student asking for feedback, and I figured why just not use it as an example. I'll give feedback and fix it as I give those feedbacks. So a few things I want to tackle right away and deal with is the proportion of this logo. The logo proportion is pretty good actually. 1-to-1 ratio. This is very close. 1-to-1 ratio is probably the most fundamental and most efficient type of icon or logo that you want to create, because it can be used in a lot of spaces at its most visible and readable proportion and size. Once you start leaving that 1-to-1 or height to width or width to height, either way, and you start getting to 1-to-2, it's still safe. When you start getting into 1-to-3, it's really hard to read, and you're gonna have to reduce your logo a lot to fill up certain spaces and fit it perfectly in there. So this is a good proportion, so we're starting with that. Another thing that we want to do when we're working with logos is, here's the original. I always want to duplicate the logo, so I'm going to select it. I'm just going to select the whole thing and just duplicate it so that I have two copies. And reason for this is that I have the original and I have the working version, and I can always refer back. And also, if something messes up and I don't like it, then I can always go back and say, hey, we got the original one, let's not worry about it, right? Okay, so let's start going into this. A few things about proportional logos. One of the things you have to, key points that makes a good logo you have to watch out for is visibility, readability, legibility when it's reduced down in size. So if I take this logo and I start to reduce it down, I have to observe and watch for things that start to get lost. And and as you make your logo small, and a good practice is to kind of squint your eyes and look at it when it's reduced, and when you squint, you start to see everything disappear. So when I squint, the actual slogan under the logo is gone. The spacing between the mountain peak and then the letters themselves, the ligature that says DMG, are lost. The peaks on the mountain are lost. So those are things that need to be a little bit more emphasized and brought forward so people can see it. So I'm gonna zoom in back in here, and let's deal with the peak first. Okay, so here's the mountain peak, and it looks good when you're close up, but not when you're zoomed out. So let's modify this and let's give it a peak. Actually, let's give it, let's make these peaks more obvious between the three. So we have a very obvious primary peak, secondary peak, and then with the third peak, I'm going to just drop it down just a little bit to kind of allow the secondary peak to breathe and have emphasis. All right. So there's change, minor change. Also, creating an icon, you want to make it unique and you want to give it some style. When I'm looking at this peak, it's okay. I mean, it's just, if you look at the previous, it was just totally just bland. It just looked like, it didn't even look like a peak. It looked like one giant peak. Here we've got several peaks, but I still wanted to give it a little interesting dynamic to it that makes it special, and I don't feel like it's there yet. So let's do something to it. Before we get any further, I want to deal with this issue. When I zoom in, you can notice that there is actually a stroke around this shape. There's really no reason to have the stroke here. It doesn't need it. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to just get rid of the stroke so we can deal with the mountain as it is. So there it is. And now I want to deal with these peaks and kind of modify it in a way that makes it a little bit more unique. So what I think can use this is like, a little bit of a, maybe possibly a dip in the peak here. Maybe so we add a, I'm just adding this just so we can see the difference. So now what happens is when we add this cut through here, what's emphasized is this secondary peak. I almost feel like maybe that's not the way to do it, and what should be emphasized is the actual primary peak. And so then maybe we turn this around and we cut into this portion here, right? So as I zoom out, you start to notice that there's a peak here, you know, and it just kind of gives it a little bit more pop, I think. So you do have to be careful again that this isn't too small, because then you would start to lose this as well. So I'm going to take the same shape. I'm just going to rotate it and cut it into this third peak here. I'm going to zoom out. I'm just doing this for emphasis and just to be able to see what it looks like. Eventually, if I do like this, and if the client likes this, then you can just cut this out and make, use Pathfinder to cut it out and actually make it look like a peak. So there it is. Not sure about that. Let me see what it looks like if maybe I don't want to emphasize the main peak too often. Maybe let's try this. Let's cut into the side of this peak here, or the main peak of the mountain. And actually that's not bad either. So kind of starting to look a little bit like Adidas logo. So maybe I'll flip this back around again. And maybe it's just subtle. It's not so, I think that feels better, just to kind of do a little bit subtle, but I don't want to come in like this, because then it starts to cut away this mountain. But if I just give it a little bit of cut in there, that's not that bad. And maybe I do the same thing over here. This isn't going to cut in that much, and it's going to, oops, sorry about that, cut into it just a little bit, so we still see the peaks. Okay, so there it is. So that's a possibility. If you don't love it, then we can fix it later. Anyways, so we emphasize the peak, and then the other thing that we want to do is the spacing. We talked about the spacing. It's too minimal. I think the spacing here is just enough, and I almost want to move everything out to have the equal distance spacing that this peak does. So I'm going to select all these guys, and I'm going to bring in that much more information, more gap here. As I do this, I want you to notice that I found a handle at the corner of this mountain, and I want you to see the handle from that anchor point. The handle actually comes in a diagonal, and this is where you don't get a really nice curve, fluid curve as something like the D has. So what I want to do is first clean this up and fix it just by taking the handle and just holding down shift. And when I do that, the handle becomes basically horizontal, and the curve becomes a lot smoother. And just doing that alone fixed a huge part of this curve, and it's more consistent and more aligned to the curve of this D, right? So you notice that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this guy and basically guesstimate this gap here. I could measure it and do it the appropriate way, but you know what? I want to just get this done. So this is a quick lesson. It's not so oops. Oh, what's going on here? I'm trying to grab this handle. My eyes are really bad. So I'm gonna avoid that. I need to get my glasses. I'm getting old. Okay, so I'm gonna just put more spacing here. Get all the spacing. I'm gonna use a guideline. Let's do that to kind of line up these guys so they're consistent. So there's some guidelines there, right there. You guys can see that. And then I'm gonna bring this guy out. Give it some spacing here. And again, same issue on the right side over here with the handle. Kind of having going off in a different angle. So now, okay, so this is a problem here, because when I brought the handle down horizontal, notice that curve really just flattens out and is not consistent with the actual curve of the C. And the more I pull out, it doesn't do anything. Okay, and so the problem is this. If you notice, I need to match the curve. Let me get rid of these guidelines. I need to match the curve to the curve of the G. Well, the problem is that the G has its peak around here, and so does the curve if I want to match it of this mountain. So the peak is here, and that's where the actual handle should be. The handle, or anchor point. Anchor point should be right there, and this anchor point should be just a regular corner anchor point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an anchor point. So I'm going to go in here, get the right tool, anchor point plus sign, and because what you want is the anchor point to be, oops, sorry, you want the anchor point to be at the most horizontal point of your curve. This is the most horizontal point, and it starts to curve down. It's no longer horizontal tangent. So I'm going to add an anchor point there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this handle point to just a regular corner handle, right? And then now I can control that curve here, and then also I'm gonna give it a little bit more spacing, and if you notice, the actual curve looks much more consistent to the actual curve of the letter G. Okay, so I'm gonna fix this, make this more consistent as well. So I'm fixing all of this, try to get it as distant from the actual DMG itself as close as possible, consistent spacing all the way around. Okay, so I zoom out. There's a nice spacing. Okay, so that looks good. Right, and then now I'm ready to go into this thing, and I'm ready to start diving into the actual letter forms itself. So we put more spacing there, let it breathe a little bit so it feels comfortable, it doesn't get muddled up. And now I want to work on the DMG part, the ligature. Okay, so one of the things that is the problem for me as a designer right away I notice is the actual counter space and also the width of the characters. The M is a symmetrical character, so it looks okay. But the problem with the D and the G, they're not symmetrical, they're not even the same width. You notice the D is way more narrower than the actual G. I think the D is a little too narrow, and I think the G is a little too wide. So we're gonna have to kind of meet in the middle. And you can also notice the huge counter space, even within the inside of the vertical stroke from the G here to the inside of the vertical stroke of the D into the curved stroke. That's almost like twice as wide. So we're gonna have to come and do a compromise and meet somewhere in the middle. So I'm gonna go in, zoom in, and the first thing that I want to do is I had guidelines already built. I want to cut this G, the D, and open it up. I want to make the D as unique, you know, and I don't want it to be just about 3 different typefaces or characters in a typeface touching and making a ligature. I want to make the logo unique and stand out. And that's what I would suggest. And so one thing that I want to do is I'm going to kind of make it look almost like an ambergram where you reflect it and it would be the same type of look. So what I want to do is I want to open this up, and it'll still be recognized as a D. So what I'll do is I drew guidelines to line it up to the top of the vertical stroke of the G. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here to the D, and I'm going to actually just use my pen tool to create a shape. Oh, yeah, that is going to be, I forgot that there's a problem here too, but we'll deal with that in a minute. So I'm going to use the pen tool to create a shape that I'm going to cut out of the D. But before we do that, one of the issues was that this counter space in the actual D itself, the original D, was never cut out of the DMG shape. They were sort of combined, and they drew I don't know whether they drew the D or they forgot to do this, but the D is floating, so I can move this, and there it is. The counter space is just floating around. So I'm going to have to cut this out of the actual DMG shape itself. So I'll select that and select the DMG. Use my Pathfinder minus front tool here. Click on it, and bam, that should do it. So if you notice, they're all selected. So now that's one giant shape. I want to make sure that I bring the actual cutaway shape to the front. I'm going to select this shape, select the DMG, and I'm going to do the same Pathfinder tool here, minus front. I apologize for the camera quality. So now I've got this opening very similar to the actual G itself. So they're starting to look a little bit more symmetrical and also more unique. The G looks definitely unique, but it still looks like a G and almost like a backward G. The D looks unique and looks like a backward G. And so then one of the things that I want to do is I want to kind of make them more uniform. You notice that the G has a curve. The part of the top curve of the G just cuts diagonally where the D is horizontal. So I want to kind of, I think I really want the D to look like a D and not like a backward G. So I'll leave this alone, but I do have to widen it. It's too narrow. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to come about, I'm going to bring my guides back up, and I'm going to draw some guide. Here's my inside of my curve, inside of the curve, and then here's the, if I notice, it's about yay distance from here, and so it's about the same distance out here, and it goes out even further. So it's about somewhere in the middle, somewhere out here. And I'm going to bring the other guy in, so I want to be about halfway. So if this is about where it is, if that's where it is, as far as the distance from the curve on the G to the vertical stroke inside, then I want to come to the G here, and I want to meet somewhere in the middle. So here, I'm going to say around there. Okay, so this is kind of like meeting in the middle, splitting the difference basically. So all I'm doing is using the direct selection tool, and I'm selecting the anchor points, and I'm just going to move it out. And that's all I'm really doing. And then obviously if I do that, I have to draw a guideline, line up the top part of the D and have those line up as well. So there it is. Okay, oops, sorry about that. And so when I do this, I'm also going to want to fix this. There's a lot of little extra anchor points that I don't need, so I'm going to delete some of those. So I'm going to come in here and get rid of the multiple anchor points here. I think probably don't need that one. Oops. That one's not allowed. Let me see, where are my anchor points. So there's an anchor point and there's an anchor point. And then also, if you notice that my tip has a handle, and I don't want that either. So I'm going to use my anchor tool to get rid of the handle, just give it a corner. And here I'm only going to need one. I don't need both of these anchor points. I'm going to get rid of one. I'm going to get rid of this one right here. And then I'm going to use this anchor point to flatten it out. Oops. Make the handles horizontal. May need to come up just a little bit, a couple of points here. And I'm going to make the handle horizontal, and I'm going to control the curve. Oops. So they're nice and smooth and consistent, okay, and fluid. Okay. And so there's my D, right? I'm going to zoom out, and then now I'm going to basically fix my G to mimic the D, because the D, you don't want it to have too much curve on the top portion of the letter. So a couple of things I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this in portion of the way. So I'm going to use my selection tool, direct selection tool, and select all these guys. I'm basically selecting these corner points, and I'm going to bring that in about halfway. Okay, and I know that tweaked the curves. I'm going to have to go in and fix all of that. And I want this to be very symmetrical, so I'm going to bring my guides back up. And if you notice, I want all the points to kind of line up, mirror itself. So I'm going to draw a guideline to the corner of the bottom D, and if you notice, the corner of the bottom G is not in the place that it should be. So I'm going to take that guy and I'm going to bring it down. And if you notice from doing the upper part of the mountain, there's also a stroke around this DMG character, so I'm going to get rid of that too. I don't think it needs it. There's no purpose for it, so I got rid of that. And then if you notice the curve here, it's really warped. So remember, when you do draw curves, you want to anchor anchor points. I'm looking for all the anchor points here. So if you look at the anchor points, let me get rid of my guideline, and if I click on this and you see all my anchor points, you got one here, and there should be one up here actually on the most. Let me zoom out. So there should be an anchor point here, but there's none up here. And the most horizontal top, most horizontal tangent bottom, most horizontal tangent to the left, and most, we don't have one on the right. So we need to do some fixing. So basically, this anchor point here needs to be moved down to somewhere around here. Okay, and so I'm going to do that. I'm going to take this guy and just move it down here, and then I'm going to use the because it doesn't look like it has a handle on the opposite end, so I'm going to use my anchor point tool, and I'm going to pull that handle, and notice it doesn't work that great. It still looks whacked because we're missing an anchor point up here, so I need to add another anchor point at the most horizontal point here, and that needs to be moved out a little bit. And now the curve is starting to come back, and you can see that it's starting to look better. And we need to do the same fixing down here. So this anchor point, first of all, we don't need this corner anchor point. I don't like corner anchor points, so I'm going to get rid of that one. And then I'm going to take this guy, and now this guy belongs down here at the bottom portion of the tangent curve. And I'm going to use my anchor tool, and I'm going to fix that. And now I can use the direct sensor and fix my curve and bring it out. Right? And so there it is. I'm starting to fix that. Okay. So I just fixed all the handles. So now I notice that there's a handle in the tangent portion up here, which is good. That is good. Okay. But I don't want this. I don't want the corner handle. There's another anchor point there. I don't need any of those. I'm going to get rid of that. Because remember, I'm going to try to mimic the D from the other side. So I'm going to get rid of some of these anchor points. I'm going to get rid of that one. I'm not going to get rid of this one. I want to use it as a tool to line as an endpoint. To line up with the actual vertical stroke of the G. So I'm going to use a guideline, and I'm going to bring this guy up here, and I'm assuming that this horizontal corner on the D, no it's not. So let me draw another guideline. There it is, the bottom one. Right, so let me line that up. So that would be on the top. Let me zoom out for a second. On the top we have a guideline that lines up with that, so I'm going to use that guideline to line that corner point at the top here, and there it is. And so when I zoom out, now my D and my G, okay, let me get rid of the guidelines, look very mirrored and symmetrical, and my G still looks like a G, my D looks like my D, and all the spacing looks good. We do have to fix this part here, because remember the mountain point, the G was curving down, so the tip of that corner is pointing down, so I gotta select that and kind of bring it back up now to line up with the new G. Okay, so there's that. Okay, and so there's the new DMG. Looks a lot more professional. You look at the old DMG, and you know there's a lot of playfulness in this font here. And again, the imbalance between the counter spaces. So now when I look at the new one, it feels better. I mean, it's still, I can still tell that this is a lot more open than this, but it's much closer and feels more comfortable than the other one. So I'm going to zoom out. You can see the difference. The mountain looks more unique. Still an issue with the slogan. So I zoom out some more, and then it still gets, again, it's going to get lost. I almost want to either completely get rid of this, or the other thing I can do is we can stack it on 2 lines. Let's try that. So I'm going to take this, stack it on 2 lines. Obviously we can't have that, and if we increase this, it's way too big, right? Specializing in, I think the font size could be almost somewhere between this and the old one. So this is at, what's the point here? This is at 70 points, and this is at 30 points, almost 40. So between 70 and 40, split the difference. 40, 70, so you got 30 points, so 15. So let's just say 15, so maybe 55. Is that right? Okay, so that's a good size font right there. So now I can read everything, but obviously it's, how do we fit it in here? what I would say suggest, I think go down a couple of more points smaller, but what I'm gonna suggest is just let's letter space open this the whole thing. Let's try this. Okay, there's 200. I'm gonna try 220, maybe 230. Okay, so quality services is almost flush with the justified with the DMG, and then I'm going to take the specialized and I'm going to work with that. I'm going to take those guys and go in here, and I think here maybe take this guy and do like a 250, maybe a 260. Right, let's give it this space. Oops. And then I'm gonna just open this guy up a little bit more. 270. Maybe it's like 290. Okay, and then I'm gonna close this guy up a little bit. I'm gonna give it 210. Maybe 200. Okay, so we're getting closer, and maybe give this 95. There it is. Okay, so we got it justified, specializing in quality services. And so when we reduce it, I can read it still. When I reduce it, I can still read both the logo and the actual type itself. I can see my mountains. It's kind of unique looking. And then I can read my DMG, and it's open, it's comfortable, it feels really comfortable. They look symmetrical and unique. So we went from this, which, you know, wasn't that bad of an attempt, just needed to be fine-tuned, and then we went to this. So this is the final version. And so this is about, you know, being professional and being able to charge, you know, for the knowledge. I mean, this is all based on knowledge, right, and experience. So this comes with, you know, years of experience. I've been doing this for a while, so I have an eye for this. And, you know, as a young designer, you just need to learn. You need to learn from observing some videos like this. So I'm gonna be doing more of these on the assault. The idea is the assault on bad design. So if you want to submit, just send it to me. You can send it to Jung at Squeat, and that's SKUEAT.com, or you can send it to Bob at Squeat.com. And hopefully you guys send me stuff. I will upload it. If you like this, please make sure you like the page. Make sure you share it as well. So this is Jung, and this is Assault, and we're gonna sign off, and we'll talk to you next time.